Welcome everyone. I'm Harrison Woods back with Tipping the Scale. I think we're up to episode 5 now. So am very appreciative of my founding members or people I interview, and we have Brother Aki here. He is doing a lot of things in AI and Web3. He's like trailblazing a lot of stuff now. And I've noticed you from I think maybe last year from the Connect Philly. Used to come out to a lot of the events. I saw they had interviewed you or they had posted your some content of yours, and it
Yeah,
just got me super excited because, seeing how AI is taking off now, especially with the recent developments. And I like, we'll get into that, I'm sure, later on. But yeah, please feel free to introduce yourself and sort of explain out your journey.
definitely. And I appreciate you having me on, Harrison. So as you mentioned, Akinyemi Bajulaiye is my full name. Friends call me Aki. And yeah, my career has been very multidisciplinary. My background is actually started in the sciences, biology, and then into the startup entrepreneurship space. So that's kind of where I've been living over the last 10 years. And I've also been into other avenues as well. Real estate to now over the last 5 years has been very tech heavy, AI, emerging technologies. You mentioned Web3, very much into that, and so yeah, happy to be here and yeah, see what the conversation goes.
Awesome. All right. So I guess the first question I sort of want to take us on your journey of well, first, because I saw you got your BS in biology, am I correct?
Mhm.
I have my BS in biology too from Lincoln University. So it's kind of interesting how, I feel like a lot of people get biology degrees and then end up doing something like totally different. So I got my biology degree and became a DJ and then in the real estate, and you got your biology degree and now you're in Web3 and AI. So just take us on that journey, sort of how you became to be who you are now.
Yeah, for sure. So as you mentioned, biology is what I studied, and I say that when I got to college, growing up, I was always a student who was into math and sciences, and in my household, growing up in a Nigerian household, I don't know how many Nigerian friends you got, but there's three paths that you are encouraged to go down, either medicine, law, or engineering, and so at the time, I was thinking more along the lines of medicine. That's kind of like that's what I knew, and I had an interest in that. And I say after I graduated, I studied biology. I was pre med in college, and then after I graduated, I worked in science research for a lab. And during that time, basically, I was given tuition benefits. So during that time, like I would take different classes. I'd actually take some science classes because I was thinking about grad school, but then I would also kind of just take classes for fun too. So there was this one course that I took at the time. This is back in 20, I want to say 14. It was a health innovation and technology course.
Hmm.
And I learned during that time there was actually a startup incubator. And I didn't know what that was at that point. Like that wasn't really my background, and that's just not what I knew at the time. But I really fell in love with that space. And I remember during that time you were encouraged to working on an idea, specifically an app. And so during that time, I started working on this idea called Share Anonymous. So this is why I was working at that. It was actually in Philly at the time it was called Penn Tower, but I think it's since been knocked down actually. And I was working on this idea called Share Anonymous. That was a peer-to-peer mobile platform for college students. Basically, a way to a place to get support when you're feeling overwhelmed on campus. And suicide was a real issue at that. I mean, mental health for college students and in general is still an issue, but at the time, especially, there had been like 13 suicides that happened on Penn's campus, leading up to that point in the span of like 3 years. So that was kind of what inspired that to me to work on that. But I got so immersed in that space, I actually left my job at that time and pivoted my career. So I began working on that startup full time. And I carried that out. We ultimately launched it, and I went through different incubators and boot camps. So Philly startup leaders. It was all while I was in Philly. And I tell people I felt like it was startup 101 for me because there's definitely a lot of just growth during that period of time. And I continued working on that for 4 years. But then, after about 1 year working on it full time, I started over at the Pennovation Center, and so I was on the launch team at Pennovation, and ultimately became their biolabs manager, and that's kind of where I started. At that point, I felt like it kind of facilitated my pivot, if you will,
Mhm.
and what led me into other spaces. But yeah, so started in biology, and then yeah, shifted after that. But yes, interesting observation though that you have about, you said, people who oftentimes will study bio and then go in another direction.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it is attributed to well, I guess it's how, like you said before, for me it was like I was young, I always like medicine and biology, so it made sense for me to be a doctor because at that point in time, that's all I knew. That was the highest money making thing I could sort of conjure in my mind as a child. That like, oh, if you're in biology, the only way you're going to make money is if you become a doctor. There's really no other way to make money. And then we get exposed to different things and just like, okay, it's not all about the money. This actually is more interesting than biology was originally. And then you tend to pivot to other things like that. So it sort of speaks to how, being exposed to different things is so important because a lot of times I was thinking about like, what if I what if I had became a doctor, like how unhappy I would have been if I would have discovered like real estate afterwards and been like, oh, like I wish I would have done this instead of this. And you get trapped in like this, the golden handcuffs essentially, because you get used to living a certain lifestyle and or the debt that comes with going to medical school and stuff like that. So tell us more so after what happened after the startup. So did you ever end up selling the app or what happened after that?
Yeah. I ultimately shut it down.
Mhm,
This was, I think I worked on it until 20 late 2017,
mhm,
and ultimately, it's interesting when it comes to entrepreneurship and startups. Like they say, like the point at which you stop working on something is also the point at which you can actually just keep going with it. And a lot of times it's just a decision that you make. And so like um, all in all, I would I would say it was a failure. Like I say, like the idea itself, like just didn't work out,
mhm,
ultimately. But it was like, I could have kept working on it. And to be honest, even to now, like, at certain points in time, like I still have the code and stuff from it, where I'm like, and we may get a little bit into, it's like AI and some of the stuff that, some of what you're able to do with it now. But I've had conversations since then about um continuing forward with with what I was working on at that time, or I've even had conversations about handing it over to someone else to do it. But I think during that time, when I was kind of deciding, should I continue forward with this or should I not, I was also looking at opportunities to go by,
mhm,
and I was thinking to myself, like, is you weigh the kind of like risk and reward around, if I continue to work on this for the next 4 years or 8 or whatever, like
mhm.
and let's say it doesn't work out the way that I want it to, is will I feel better about that than stopping it now and knowing that let's say it could have gone in a direction that I didn't want it to, and ultimately, like, I decided to stop working on it for that reason. Like I wanted to, I felt like I was in a different space at that point in time, and then also even the interest I had developed, and just having now at that point been an entrepreneur, if you will, for 4 or 5 years, and just like understanding more things, like the kinds of ideas that I would want to pursue, and what I could see myself even committing like 10 plus years to, or however long. I had more of a sense of that. So I kind of look at that period of time for me more as like what facilitated me like pivoting into this space. And yeah, all in all, I'll say like I typically tell people like it just didn't, ultimately I just shut it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not interesting because I think like when we grow up, we have this concept of that just like you're only supposed to do one thing. And if
Right.
that one thing doesn't work out, then like you failed and you end up doing something that like you hate for the rest of your life when it's actually fine for you to or the most successful entrepreneurs fall, or fail or pivot energy
Yeah.
dozens of times. You know what I mean? So it's like I'm happy like I said, for me it was becoming a doctor, pivoting to being a DJ, and then now I'm pivoting towards real estate. And it's like it's all fine. And especially and a lot of people think because you didn't accomplish what you set out to do, like you're like quote unquote like maybe poor or like
Right.
you did not have money because that idea failed. So like you're supposed to be, but like I said, I would say to people like it's as an entrepreneur, you're crazy because you're going against what 99% of what humanity thinks of just like having this straight line. And when you're an entrepreneur, you're actually creating that line rather than just walking it. So take me to like what happened after the app. What did you pivot to after that?
Yeah, so I worked on the app for full time for a period of time. So I was working on it. This is like 2015, 2016. And then it was during that time that I started working at the Pennovation during the day. So at that point, once I stopped working on the app, I was for a period of time just working at Pennovation and thinking about sort of what else I wanted to do. And it was around that time I started getting into real estate. So I got into I got licensed in real estate, and I also began working on something called One Jollof at the time, which is are you familiar with One Jollof?
I've heard of it, but it sounds very familiar. But please explain.
So it was an organization that myself and some friends and partners began around connecting the African diaspora.
Mhm.
And so we would host these different kind of mixers and networking type events in Philly and Greater Philadelphia area. So we do these Afro brunches. We would do these Afro nights and things that sense. And it was all the center of it was food. So we would always have like jollof fries and these different brunch foods. And then that actually led into us, because we worked on that into the pandemic, and that led in where we kind of shut down the events aspect of things, and that led into us working on a podcast called the Pepper Soup Talk Show during that time that we did for a couple of years. But that started in 2019. But even before then, I got into real estate 2018 was when I really started taking steps into the space. I got licensed as a realtor, but that began because I was working. So I was working at Pennovation. I remember having conversations with a friend of mine who was there. Her name was Brianna Moore, and she was telling me about this event that was happening called it was called Buy Our Block, I think. And during that time, there was the whole craze in the media around people talking about buy back the block. I think like Rick Ross had that song, buy back,
Yeah,
and that was just like the energy that was there at the time.
absolutely, absolutely.
And around then, I had just moved to North Philly, and I was on. Are you from Philly?
Yes.
I was on 30th and Cecil B, and
Okay.
this was 2016. So I was at the intersection of where the gentrification was sort of happening. And
Okay.
so, I felt like, I look to the left and I see one thing, and I look to the right and I see another thing. And, my background we talked about was very different. Like my background was more so the science. I didn't really have much of an awareness around urban, economic development, things
Mhm.
in that sense. But it definitely planted a seed in me to just want to kind of learn more about what was going on here, and then that kind of turned into a real interest in development in general, but was something that I ended up exploring through real estate.
Mm.
And so after I had that conversation with a friend, which happened maybe a year after I moved to North Philly, I went to this event that happened to be actually at an apartment complex I was living in at the time called the Eastern Lofts, and it was an event called Buy Our Block. They had these different people from the neighboring community, but then also just real estate uh, professionals across the city,
Mm.
and a lot of the conversation was around encouraging people to invest in real estate, get into the industry in some way, whether it was become a wholesaler or a realtor or investor or whatever. And it definitely inspired me to start taking steps into the space. And I was very interested in it from an investment standpoint.
Mm.
And I thought, okay, I think at the time I was thinking, I'll either go the wholesaling route or I'll become an agent and to just learn more about real estate because
Mm.
I had no real reference point. And then shortly after I joined real estate investing club called Better Than Success.
Oh
And
yes, with what's her name? Oh my goodness.
I think
Nicole Purvey.
yeah, yeah. So yes, I was in BTS. 20 started 20 was at 18, like late, and so that was shout out to them too. I mean, I learned a hell of a lot during that period of time. I go to their masterminds every week, and I made some good friends, through that also. And yeah, it was just really just like a sponge, and got my license. I learned later on that the apartment complex I was living in was actually black owned, and that it was my property manager was actually was part owner of the complex, Leslie Smallwood Lewis, and so then so I remember at that time because uh, I had a relationship with her during then when I was living there. I was basically getting advice on, okay, should I get my license or should I uh, is it necessary, and kind of figuring out what to do and getting advice. And so ultimately got my license, and then I became I went on to Mosaic Brokerage Group
Okay.
as a realtor, and I was actually the first realtor with Mosaic at the time, and then that led me down the real estate agent journey,
Okay.
and then yeah, that kind of I was in that space from 2018, late 2017, 2018 to about last year. Really,
Oh wow.
my license is my license is an escrow right now. Yeah,
Awesome. So once again, another pivot towards the real estate thing.
yeah, yeah,
And you're just soaking up everything and then you learn about real estate. So now you're ultimately like diversifying your experiences, but also like what you can potentially invest in. So, all right, you're in real estate. I'm guessing what you were doing single family, like selling and selling single family houses and everything like that, partnering people with like their future homes and everything like that. All right. So what was the pivot after that? Because it's funny because I had questions lined up for you, but it's just like great. It's to go through a timeline of the things you've
yeah.
done and the experience that you learned from that. So I'm sure, like, what was one of the top things I think you learned that were like life skills from the real estate journey?
Whew. A lot of lessons from real estate, man. It's not for the faint of heart. I feel like.
Yes.
um, I would say biggest lessons from real estate. Um,
Or
I mean,
lessons that you've carried over into your next space.
I think the biggest thing was probably really like knowledge of self, like understanding who you are. I think in society there's this real push for to take action, which
Mhm.
in a lot of cases is a good thing, right? Taking, you hear people say take massive action, jump before you're ready, um, like go just get started with it. The hardest part is, beginning is half the battle, and that may be the case for a lot of people. Something I've learned about myself is I like I'm one who takes action in general on things, and I will, I'm going to buy that course, I'm going to go through that workshop, I'm going to go to that conference or whatever. I Something I actually learned, and I think real estate also was like a lesson for me in that process, is I actually need to gather more data before making the decision sometimes, or I need to not actually jump uh, quite so early, or quote unquote before I'm ready sometimes, and
Mhm.
have to like really gauge when it makes sense to take that next step, or take that jump versus kind of just wait. So it's like, but some people, you suffer from analysis paralysis, right? And but I think with like a industry like real estate, but then also other industries where, and I guess also it kind of depends on sort of what your involvement in it looks like. In my case, it was more entrepreneurial. When you're a realtor, you're an independent contractor, hang your license with a brokerage, but you're running a business for all intensive purposes, and same thing, if you're investing. So, and there's also risk involved in that as well.
Absolutely.
And so just being able to make the decisions that are best for you um, involves really understanding yourself and understanding what you need, and what your and where your strengths and where your weaknesses are, and moving based off of that, and not necessarily what the signaling they may be getting from society, which is I find a lot of times it's just like just go, or just just take the
Mhm.
jump. So I think that was probably the biggest thing I learned from real estate, which is, and I was so I've I mean, I've always been a voracious learner, right? And so I, even to like to this point right now, like I'm constantly consuming information, learning more, getting knowledge. Uh, and so I always had, whether it was when I was in real estate, whether it was space I'm at now in terms of Web3, crypto, AI, and all of that. Very eager to learn, right, and eager to like get into things. So like that energy was and probably will always be there. But I think sometimes it's like I remember even like I'd go to these masterminds, and it was like the first person who would come in to speak about whatever mortgages, wholesaling, invest. In my head, I was like, okay, this is gonna be my mortgage
Mm,
broker. Or this is gonna be whatever, and I would kind of like create that narrative in my head. But I think in general, one of the things I've definitely just learned about myself, and that came from the time I spent in real estate, was just um, your decision making process, which I think just like knowing yourself, to know like, okay, what kind of person are you?
mm,
And so I know that yeah, I'm somebody who I gotta hold the horses sometimes, and I appreciate like even people I'm around, like one of my very close friends. He's like probably the opposite of me, where he needs every single data point, you know, before he makes a decision. So also having people who can kind of balance you out uh,
mhm.
is helpful too.
Awesome. I think I've also been in a situation where like you're like I feel like there's one point in time when I felt as though I was chasing too many rabbits.
Mm,
Like I was like, oh, okay, I'm super into stocks, I'm super into real estate, and I'm super into DJing. Like I can do it all at the same time. And
yeah.
then I think I was reading somewhere, and the guy was or someone that was super successful. He's like, listen, like you can't chase too many rabbits. Like you need to
Mm,
focus on one that's going
yeah.
to. So kind of a big deal. But a crazy lesson I learned was I love DJing. I had no desire to scale it. And
Mm,
because I had no desire to scale it, it was time for me to find something else that I was comfortable with scaling. And
yeah.
that's when I found out it was with real estate. And make a long story short, as someone gave me advice to get into syndications and buying apartments.
Mm,
And it's funny because now I'm veering into apartments and learning how that's and how like asset management. Because when you're buying apartments, either you're finding the deal, find the money for the deal, or you're managing the asset. And I realized that, I didn't want to look at spreadsheets all day doing acquisitions. So I got into capital raising. And then you feel like, and then you find out that, like, okay, capital raising, if you're going to be bringing money to these deals, that half of it is really just marketing and sales. And I had to
mm,
realize, okay, am I comfortable with like doing the content thing and building the brand? And that's
yeah.
what it means to really take this capital raising thing to the next level. And I was like, okay, like this is something I'm comfortable with scaling. Whereas
Mm,
with DJing, I could have started a company, I could have started doing, festivals, but none of that stuff really like appealed to me. I just like playing for people, here and there and calling it a day. So really just focusing on something that was cool with scaling that happened to be real estate and then just doubling down on that. And even now, like I do crypto, like as I'm sure we'll get into one thing, but like that's sort of like I can't give that too much energy because it's going to take, what I mean? It's going to take from other things. So I'm gonna, I do about 10% of my portfolio into there, like, like they tell you you're supposed to, and I let it go out. And like I said, like talking with people like you and hearing your experiences, finding out what could be interesting to me or what the future may hold.
mm.
So, um, jump from real estate. What was after real estate?
All right. So after real estate, I'll say pandemic hit.
Okay.
It was 2020. I was still in real estate, but everything shut down during that time, and so I had definitely had a lot of time in my hands. We were at the time I was still working at Pennovation, and we had gone remote for a period of time,
Uh-huh.
like 100% remote, and then we weren't able to. We weren't really practicing, and then construction wasn't happening for a period of time. I remember my broker at the time, her name is Tracy Powell. She had this webinar that she did on lessons from the '08 crisis, and it was a webinar, and she had on a stockbroker alongside her. So she would give like the real estate side of things, and then stockbroker. I want to say her name was Courtney. I can't remember her last name, but she would kind of talk about the stock side.
Hmm.
And so I had tapped into that webinar really partly just because somebody from my brokerage who was the home team at the time, just kind of doing something, and I thought I could pick up maybe pick up a lesson or two. Like I wasn't when the crisis happened, and a lot of people were talking about the pandemic during that time. They were like relating it or comparing it to the that crash in like '07, '08. So I said, like, let me see what kind of pointers I could pick up and whatnot. And I was there mostly for the real estate aspect of things, but uh I remember the stockbroker started naming certain people and saying to look them up. And so in that moment, just like out of curiosity, even though I wasn't really there for that, I'll go on Instagram and I'll look up this person or look up that person, and then it got me into this rabbit hole of trading. And remind you, everything's shut down at this point. So it's so I'm going down this rabbit hole, and long story short, next thing I know, I find myself, paying thousands of dollars learning how to learn technical analysis and swing trade. And
Okay.
so so when you asked about my next pivot or my next, sort of endeavor, it was definitely trading. I got very heavy and immersed in trading, during the pandemic, which I feel like a lot of people did. A lot of people
Mhm.
started getting like Robinhood and, the, even some of the meme coins and GameStop and things like that. But I got really, I got into it in a really intense way, and and haven't stopped since then. Also, but yeah, so that was definitely the next thing. And then when the world opened up again after the pandemic, I was still, I still had my license active, and I was still, doing that to an extent. I'd also bought, I'd invested a little bit too. Like I had a duplex in Delaware County that I was managing, and so I was still in real estate, but definitely trading and investing in the financial markets became a very, very deep interest for me. Yeah.
Awesome. So real estate, now you're trading.
Yeah.
You got your assets, and now you're swing trading, doing stuff like that as well too. Okay, so what was after the stocks? What was it?
All right. So after the stock, I was taking through the whole timeline. All right. Okay. So yeah. So after the stocks, and I guess, the interesting thing about life is that in general, it's never just like a straight line like that, right?
Never.
So it's so you mentioned crypto, for example. I first got into crypto in 2017, where a friend of mine, showed me his portfolio. I saw, he owned Bitcoin, he owned Ethereum, and I saw just kind of like what his balance was, and like I'd heard about Bitcoin and these things before, but it definitely got me to look more deeply into it. I
Mhm.
didn't put much money into it, but that was kind of the my initiation, if you will, into that space. And so I've been like kind of like tapped into that space since then. But 2020, 2021, and mind you, or 20, was it 2020? Yeah, 2021. Yeah, mind you, I'm still working at the Pennovation Center, by the way, at this point in time, um, and I'm very into trading, and I'm learning about I'm also learning about long term investing and options, and all these things, and I learn about something called DeFi, and so I get very into DeFi, and both from the investment standpoint and from the just like the ideal of decentralized technologies, DAOs, uh, different ways how creates different ways of building an organization, the idea of kind of community and cooperative economics, um, an alternative to straight capitalism that we see. I got very into that sort of thing with Web3 and crypto, and that was in 2021. And I went like really deep into that space as well. But it wasn't it hasn't in general been just like one thing or the other for me. I've uh, I've always kind of worn multiple hats. I'll say that it's interesting. I don't know if you've read the book, The One Thing.
No.
It's a really, really good book. And interestingly, the author of The One Thing was he's actually the founder of Keller Williams, I think.
Oh wow.
And I remember when I read that book, it was I was just getting into real estate at that time, but I'd gotten it as a recommendation from someone that wasn't even like real estate related, and I just happened to see. I was like, oh wow, like the founder that was the author of it was founder Keller Williams, but talks about um, the idea of hyper focusing, and and your results compounding over time. And so definitely, I'm someone who's probably since then, which some years ago, have been in the mindset of focus on a few things or focus on fewer things, but at the same time also acknowledging that it's okay to it's okay to have multiple interests, and it's okay to
Absolutely.
um, have multiple goals. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both, and but you have to understand what may come with it, from like a time standpoint. You may understand certain things may take longer. You just have to understand
Yeah,
kind of like what the intentions behind what you're doing and
absolutely.
implications of it. And I'm someone who I'm into, I have multiple interests, but I also see them as very much so connecting. So when it comes to, let's say, AI and crypto, for example, that's something that I believe we're actually seeing really merge more and more right now. And we could talk about even just like what's recently happened in the news with DeepSeek um, and the large language models, but then how like that directly relates to kind of a lot of what's happening with AI and crypto right now as well. So it's yeah, so everything's interconnected, you know what I mean? But yeah, 2021, you definitely got super into the DeFi space, and I've been into that since then too.
All right, so let's fast forward a little bit. So, what do you have going on now? What seems to be like a top priority right now for you, right, or projects of what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so I'm building Pentridge Media, which is AI powered automation agency, and that's all around helping businesses and creators increase productivity, you know, grow their businesses. So it's creating growth systems for businesses and creators. So that's you know top priority. But I'm also into trading and as we mentioned, crypto and the like.
So, how does that explain to me more of what the app does for people is who might be interested in who have businesses? So, give us an example.
So it's not an app. It's an agency.
Okay.
So it's a service business. Um, what I will say though is that I am starting to build uh, technology around that, and one of the things um, and this is actually aside from because there's a lot of what I've been doing has been more like implementation type of work.
Mm.
So helping to build out workflows for companies. So whether it's automating processes within your business. For example, there's a property management company who like, I'm helping them automate their application process. They have a lot of tenants or people who are just interested in renting from them. They have a big social following, but sometimes like there is value being lost because they're people who should be moving into their apartments or should be putting in applications, but they have more in a way of follow-ups or more in ways of just connecting the dots to reminders to move-ins and the like, then that would be more smooth and you'd be capturing more of that value. So it's creating automated workflows, and so that and the content automation has I say been the heaviest as far as the kind of work I've been doing in that space with implementation. But what I've been getting into now as well, and it connects to this AI space and something that I believe people in general should really be paying attention to is is building is building tools with AI, like software tools with AI, because just the so there's this whole. Are you familiar with like no code, like no low code?
No.
Law community. So there's this whole movement that say it probably started late 20 teens, called like no code. And so it's the idea of being able to build web applications, even mobile applications without coding. And some of them would be more drag and drop type of platform. Some of them actually have like a real learning curve to them. Like an example would be Bubble, and you can build web apps and sometimes mobile apps with these kinds of tools. There've even been like programming languages that connect to these no code tools. One is called Swift, and so that's a whole movement that grew, and even certain software or applications that are on that you see, you might go on the website or they might have an app, may have even been built with no code, and one wouldn't realize it. But with AI and the progression that we've seen with AI, we're at a point now where you can build these applications literally using AI, and so it is code in a lot of cases where the AI will give you what you need in order to produce the application, and in some cases it's combining code with no code to um, create whatever, whatever it is that you're looking to achieve. And this is a space that is only going to continue to get larger because of also how quickly AI is moving. And so if you think about whether it's from the standpoint of building something that others may need, whether it's from a standpoint of building something that could be helpful for your company internally, maybe you have an app idea, or maybe it's even just like a more system based idea, that would be like helpful. Like I did an event a couple months back where I spoke at, and for it I actually built out this, like it was like an automation calculator, where something that those kinds of things maybe you would white label traditionally, or you would find somebody else to do it. But with tools like, you have tools like Replit, for example, or Cursor, Bolt.new. These are tools where literally you can build out that kind of like applications or sites that people would quote thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for traditionally, and be able to do it in a fraction of the time for a fraction of the cost. And as AI continues to grow, I mean, we saw what happened with DeepSeek, but these American companies are also going to be releasing new models, and
Absolutely.
it's going to happen fast too. Whether it's ChatGPT 03 that's getting ready to launch, or Grok 3, and so it's only going to even get easier to build out these kinds of use cases. So that's something that I'm getting more deeply into, but also getting into that from like a standpoint of showing others that this is something that you can do. Yeah.
Awesome. So explain to us, or people who don't really know exactly what's going on with the AI wars right now, as I say.
Mm.
So it seems like this is a lot of people don't realize that the Chinese have finally caught up,
Yeah.
where I have the language model, and I have my thoughts about this because I think a lot of people don't understand like the stuff that's been going on between us and China for a long time. I mean, just as far as like China taking a lot of, well, allegedly taking a lot of our data and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and using it to well, we don't know what they're using it for yet, but
Yeah.
we know yeah. So explain to people that was Deep Sea was because I remember hearing about DC like maybe like a month ago or something like that, but I
Yeah.
don't think it had launched yet, but it seemed like it launched yesterday, and people are saying it could be better than ChatGPT, or how do you feel like it was?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a DeepSeek. It's a created by a Chinese company. I believe it was actually a hedge fund that built it, and it's a large language model like ChatGPT and Gemini and these other large language models that are out there. And what differentiated it from other models is that it actually surpassed ChatGPT in certain benchmarks. And the reason why that is important is because it's open source, so you actually have access to the code that went into building it. Like the average person can go online and actually look at the source code, and whereas with ChatGPT and OpenAI and a lot of these American large language models, it's closed source, and they keep all of that information private. And so you have all these open source models that exist and have existed, but DeepSeek was the first to really actually match up with the closed source models. So Meta, for example, their Llama model is open source, and that was probably like the biggest contender to your Chat GPTs as far as open source compared to closed source, but it still wasn't on the same level. And so the fact that DeepSeek is on that level, and it's 30 times cheaper to use, so it's literally pennies on the dollar to use DeepSeek. It can search the web. It can do everything that the best large language models here domestically can do. It makes you ask, oh well, why would I even have ChatGPT on my computer? Or ChatGPT, the highest model is like $200 a month. uh why would I pay $200 a month when I can use something that is going to be almost close to free? And so that's kind of created an uproar right now, and the market saw an impact by it. Nvidia was down like,
Yeah.
I think it's 16% or
Yeah,
something.
we got demolished yesterday, man. We got it was a good time to buy. It was a good time.
Yeah,
We rebounded today a little bit,
yeah,
but yeah, yeah, it was ugly. It was red yesterday, man, all
yeah,
over.
yeah. So a lot of blood, a lot of blood in the streets, and But I will say that I feel like the it was it was an overreaction
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely, absolutely.
we're gonna see these other models, whether it's American models or whatnot, make their next move. I saw I saw someone say it was like trying to put out a diss track, and
Yeah,
I was like
absolutely.
waiting for the response or something like, yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay. So, this last 15 minutes, I'd like to get like a little bit like I like because you understand this more than me. So, I tell this story all the time about how I was DJing a prom and I met this guy who was a photographer. He had this like old fashioned camera and I got there super early. And I'm talking, I said, "Oh man, it's a cool camera." I said, "Yeah, I mean, I've been doing doing photography for a long time, like around 20 years." He was like, "Before this, I was a photographer for the Wall Street Journal." I was like, "Oh,
Mm,
that's cool." I was like, "Yeah." I said, "You gotta give me some stock advice." He was like, "I'm gonna give you some even better advice." And I was like, "All right." He's like, "Well, first and foremost, he's like, if you invest in S&P, he's like, "How old are you?" I was like, "Oh, I'm like." I think I might have been like 25 at the time. And he's like, man, if you invest every year a little bit out of your paycheck in S&P 500, man, he's like, you can't lose. Like you're
yeah.
gonna get better returns than your bank. And he's like, you'll thank me later. He's like, just put anything you can into that every week and you'll be good. He was
Mm,
like, the second thing I'm gonna tell you is this. He was like, always, he was like, if you can and when you can afford it, buy the print version of the Wall Street Journal. And I
mm,
was like, really? He was like, yeah. He's like, because they put stuff. The one thing about the Wall Street Journal is that it's not biased because they follow the money. It's not about
yeah.
political views or anything like that. It's straight
Mm,
about the money. And that's when you start speaking the language of people who are affluent because people who are affluent, typically, a lot of them were the Wall Street Journal. And the second thing is that there's things that they put in the Wall Street Journal that won't be on the internet version of it. And I
mm,
was like, what? He was like, yeah, there's different articles in the paper version. And I just started subscribing maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. And he's absolutely right. Like I've seen like articles they were talking about like TD Bank got caught with they were allegedly like not doing their due diligence with the money laundering, so they found out that the China was giving the cartels were paying China for the fentanyl through TD Bank, and they got caught with that. And then
mm,
they're talking about how there's these data breaches going all over the place, and they're all from China. I'm just like, how is nobody like
yeah.
talking about this stuff? And then, they're talking, at the time it was like they're talking about the TikTok ban and everyone's like, oh, this is crazy. And I'm looking around like, do not people realize that like these people are collecting our data? They're the enemy of our state. And like, I understand people making their living over TikTok, and it's like, no, I'm not hating against anyone else, but it's like, yo, like our enemies are collecting data on this. And in
Mm,
my head, it's always like, yo, I wonder what the data, like, what are they doing with the data? Because another thing I saw in the Wall Street Journal was kind of crazy was that a content house in Tennessee, they got caught spreading Russian propaganda to Americans, and they were taking a check from the Russians. And they
mm.
came in and busted the place, and the influencers like we had no idea. It was right before the election, and they're
Oh,
like,
wow.
we had no idea what was going on. We were just getting a check, and they
Yeah.
couldn't. The influencers didn't get in trouble, but the guy at the content house sort of knew the money was coming from like this like offshore account, and they were like, well, we want you to spread this message, and they were like just paying the influencers, and they were just taking the money and just spreading the stuff. So in my head, it's always like, what are they using? What in your mind, knowing what you know, what do you think this data is being used for that they're collecting?
That's a you know so like the term like data is what say data is the new oil or
Yeah,
so I feel like it could be getting used for a number of different things. It could be getting used for a range of different things. When it comes to even deep seek, for example, and there's something to even just be mindful of for those who are using deep seek. I was just hearing, and I still need to fact check this, but I was just hearing that the information you put into deep seek that is actually in the terms and conditions that China that the the information can be used that you put into it, like so it's like your if it could be proprietary information, whatever, it can be used and like repurposed and so it's basically owned by you know
yeah,
the company
we all
and
know
so
what
if
that
you're
means.
was
Yeah,
that
we already know there's no private companies in China. There's no private companies in China.
So if you're using it, you may want to use it locally. So I've been seeing some people who are like not even using it locally on their computer,
Mm,
so like separated from the company. But then there's some issues with that because apparently it doesn't run as well when you use it that way. But man, I mean, I feel like the data could be used for a range of different things. Just to understand more about the people who are using the platform, to understand maybe ways of what you can use against other countries. Uh, and I think when I think about data and I connect it to business, I feel like data, it informs your decision making and informs your next step and how you may want to be strategic and what's going to work best for you. So probably it's intel,
yeah.
is what I would think. Yeah.
I always think it's just it's kind of like crazy and it's that like for me it's why there's people just don't care.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess it's because like they don't see like the immediate danger of it, but it's like in my head it's like if am I collecting data, that means I know if I put this out, this is going to get them to click on it and they're going to watch this and then I can like slowly influence people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like it's kind of like scary, but yeah, I mean it is what it is. I mean you gotta do what you gotta do and just be mindful of these type of things. Even with like the TikTok stuff, like TikTok has the best algorithm and everything like that. And even with that, even with the ownership stuff, it was kind of like crazy to me that like I felt some type of way honestly about like I'm like okay, like we're gonna get rid of TikTok. Like I totally get that. But then it
Yeah.
was like, okay, well, you have just give us 50% ownership and then it's all good. I'm
Mm,
like, it's
mm,
not all good. I'm just like, and sometimes it makes me think like I'm crazy, but like, do you
mm,
not see like what's going on here? Like we're being, I feel as though honestly that like I'm being sold out as a U.S. citizen. Like you're selling me out
mm,
because it's
mm.
like you're gonna take the check and you know what's going on.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like you're choosing. It's not like you don't know what's going on. We all know what's going on, and you're deciding that it's all good as long as 50% ownership is here in the U.S. I'm just like, yeah, that I just so yeah. But anyway, not to go off too into a tangent. Um, my last and final question, I guess, with you is I've been trying to find someone. I'm always like very aware of like the next big thing, and the next big thing I've sort of found is for it to be quantum computing.
Mm.
And I don't know if you know anything about that.
Very, very little. This is what is I've been seeing in the media, and I know like Google had their like discovery around it and whatnot. I haven't researched it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I just like to know if you knew anything about that. I guess the one, I guess the last question I guess I could say is, what moving forward in the AI space, what's the thing that most excites you about the future?
Man, I think we are. So I remember I said something almost a year ago where it was at a conference, and I said that we're living in a time or moving into a time where you're limited literally just by your imagination, just by the figment of your imagination. And each day that passes, and each each update that I'm seeing to these models and from these companies, it feels more and more like that. And I remember I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and he was like, it's kind of like a bunch of just tech nines just fell from the sky, and you have access to these weapons that anybody can wield now. Um, but it's a matter of like what you decide to use it for, and whether you decide to even use them. And so with that, it's like in reference to these AI tools and to these large language models. And again, now when you look at your deep seeks and these open source models that are now also, it's likely going to disrupt how these closed models are moving. It's in a lot of ways actually democratizing and decentralizing AI, and the ability for the average person who isn't ahead of a multi-billion dollar, trillion-dollar company to be able to like leverage these tools. And so I think is paradoxical, because I think what I'm most excited for um, is also what is actually a little bit scary as well, which is that we're in a time where it's like whatever idea you have or whatever you want to bring to life, like the resources to do it are available,
Mm,
and are available without necessarily needing an extreme amount of capital. You don't necessarily need to, if you want to like bring something to life, have to raise $1 million from a VC in order to do so. You have the internet. You're able to market through the internet. You're able to use these AI tools, and so I think I'm excited about being able to create, and being able to bring ideas to life. And if I say it feels like each time I see a new model get released, it feels like Christmas because
Yeah,
it's like, okay, what's
absolutely.
what's going to come next? What's going to happen next? But at the same time, we're also just living in a very disruptive period of time, and I feel like most people aren't paying attention to how quickly all of this is happening. And I think it's extremely important that people are paying attention to AI, and just at the very least, just being aware of how it's impacting businesses, impacting your work, and being very intentional about staying abreast on it, because at the end of the day, I feel like it's a phrase it's starting to become almost famous in a way where they say AI is not going to take your job. It's those who are using AI
Exactly.
that
Mhm.
will be competitive in the marketplace. And so the other side of it is just the gap that we are going to continually see in those who are either AI native, paying attention to it, leveraging these tools, and those who aren't. And that's an issue because also a lot of people from our communities who are on the side of those who maybe aren't really leaning into it. So yeah,
Absolutely. I guess the crazy thing for me is just seeing like we're just talking the last week about how things are just happening so exponentially. Like
yeah,
no one knew I'm in the sales and raising capital for these deals, and
yeah.
I kept telling people how important it is to be a part of like these masterminds where people are letting you know like this type of technology exists. I saw this lady, she's got to be pushing 60,
Mm,
and she was just like, listen, like I've been in real estate for 20 years, and I raised capital, and she just started typing away on ChatGPT, and the next thing you know, she's popping in the gamma and creates a whole like PowerPoint in like under 60 seconds, and it looks nice, you know what I mean?
yeah,
And then she's like, yeah, they got this thing called Structurally. I just invites me, I invite into my meetings, and it starts to learn my voice. So now when my investors call, it's me
yeah,
answering the phone, and unless they ask a question that like it's not learned to respond to it, that's when it calls me, and it's like it saved her over 300 hours. And just knowing like all this like really finding out that like in that you can really I'm seeing the crazy thing for me is seeing people running multi-million-dollar businesses with them AI and two VAs from the
mm,
Philippines. And I'm
mm,
just like, they're like, yeah, man, two VAs from the Philippines, like there's no in AI, there's no excuse.
yeah,
I'm just like, oh wow, you're right. And then for me, another thing is too is seeing the shift towards LinkedIn, where LinkedIn is really becoming the place where like a lot of money's being made, versus other social media platforms, because people are really building up like a structure around that, and like how branding is really becoming a thing. I never thought I thought of myself as a content creator, but I'm like, oh, like there's
yeah,
people who aren't just doing dances on TikTok.
yeah,
There's people who are just literally just putting out information there, and people are finding value in it, and they're willing to pay for more value in what your services can do, and then they're just doing business, and it's a very interesting community to be a part of. But like I said, the crazy thing is just seeing. I saw the guy last week. He had the video now of him talk. It's not him. It's AI. And then
yeah,
it's like they sell you the video. That's one price, and then they sell you the audio. That's another price.
mm,
And I'm just like, me and you, or people like me who know AI, we can sort of be like, okay, like that's not
mm,
him, but
yeah,
it's getting harder.
yeah,
It's,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it's getting
yeah,
harder,
yeah,
and like it's only been a year. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like 2, 3 years, like what's gonna happen. But one thing I'm sort of betting on, honestly, is using AI in the right way to scale your business, but also remaining organic. as far
Yeah.
as like just telling people like, listen, like I'm never going to be the one to just do like straight AI videos of me like doing stuff. Like I feel
Yeah.
like in the future, what's going to happen is people, it's going to get somewhat saturated at a point, and then people are going to return back to like organic and like and then not to ramble, but this is the last thing I'm gonna say, and this is the crazy thing is how they've been on this vicious campaign of people doing AI headshots,
Mm.
and they paid $25 and you take
Yeah.
some different pictures of yourself and then it generates an AI like picture of yourself. It looks real, but like you see people what they look like in real life, like there's no way. And I'm just like, come on, like I know the headshot looks good. It does
Yeah.
look good, but it's like
Yeah.
it's not you. And part
Right.
of being a human is having blemishes. It's is having those certain shadows of your face. Like
Yeah.
you're going to get old, and you need to embrace that.
Mm.
You need to
Yeah.
like show people that. And I feel like it's those type of things are going to shine through this artificial future we have coming for ourselves. So
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like I can definitely see an anti-AI kind of space being cultivated as well, like people who are intentional about doing things completely organically. And I think that, yeah, I feel like trust is also huge in that. So even if you are leveraging AI, whether it's explicitly stating that this is like you're doing it more as a demonstration to show, okay, this is what AI is capable of, or whatever it is that you maybe sell. Let's say you're someone who's selling uh, AI headshots, or you're selling AI video. Um, you don't necessarily need, because you might go on YouTube, for example, and you'll see. I see it a lot. I see it a lot with crypto, especially where you'll see you see a video of some like known figure. It might be like a Michael Saylor or whoever, and it's actually like you look at it for long enough, you're like, oh, this is definitely an AI version
oh,
of
he's
it.
he's talking about like the next big thing or something.
Yeah,
Yeah. I've seen those. And they be on YouTube too. I'm like, yo,
yeah,
YouTube don't even
yeah.
care. Like,
Yeah. So I feel like explicitly, stating that this may be that's AI that's doing this, and some of the measures. But I think also as time goes on, we're going to start seeing more safeguards around that.
mm,
Where right now, I think on social media, they ask you to put that this is AI,
yeah,
which is that's in the video. Some people put it, some people don't. But I think eventually it'll be kind of connected to your
absolutely.
there'll just be some way of kind of determining whether it's AI generated.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Aki, for coming out, man,
Yeah,
and being a part of the show. It really means a lot. We gotta chill in person soon, man.
for sure. No, for
And
sure.
man, I really appreciate your journey and what you got going on, and I really hope to have you back in the future when you do something else different again in 2 years, and I can talk about where you pivot to next. By that time, I'll have a studio. I'm telling you, 2 years, I'm gonna have a studio set up. Oh yeah, and also talk because you have a content house too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So,
So
yeah, I'm sorry before. Let people know about the Content House and where they can reach you and contact you if they're interested.
yeah, so the content house is called Pentridge Manor. So the brand I'm building is all around this idea of Pentridge. So the house is actually all started with the house. So Pentridge Manor is on Pentridge Street in Philadelphia, and then the automation agency is Pentridge Media, and so the house that all began as an Airbnb. I'd gotten this spot at 2021, and then I put it on Airbnb. My friend of mine told me to also consider putting it on Peerspace, and I started putting it on Peerspace. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I learned Peerspace is kind of like Airbnb for content creators, and I just liked the results I was getting from it, and the kind of people who were coming to the house. So it was people coming in shooting music videos. There were, there was a TV show that was happening over there this past weekend. Documentaries. We've had movies, podcasts, like every kind of creative pursuit that you can think has like happened there, and so, but it's been dope also building relationships with some of the people who have come here, and even staying connected. And I think it's something that not that many people are doing here. Also in Philadelphia, people are very much into Airbnb, but you don't see that many content houses. There's a few others that I know about, but I feel like Atlanta and some other, Austin, some other cities are more up on it. So I feel like it's definitely also an opportunity for people if you're thinking about doing this kind of, if you're thinking about short-term rental or investing. And so yeah, that's Pentridge Manor. And then as far as where to find me, I'm on social media at Sir Akinbi. On most social media, Twitter, I'm DeFi Poppy, and I say yeah, you can find me on social media, Sir Akinbi, and yeah, now I enjoy my time here. I'll just leave people with yeah, AI. I just feel like there needs to be really be an urgency around this right now, and so yeah, just encourage people to go further into that space, and just to make sure like you're really taking it seriously. Like it can, again, like, and I'm sure if you've implemented this in certain ways as far as like how it can help your business and how it can make things easier for you, but then just for people to understand like the implications of it from a societal standpoint, I just think we all need to be thinking about that.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you very much again, Aki. Once again, thank you guys for coming out to Tipping the Scale podcast. We will see you next time.